Factor, the #1 cable news show for 16 years and counting.
Continuing now with our lead story, 49-year-old Neil Gorsuch is the nominee for the Supreme Court. President Trump gave his reasons a few moments ago, and then the judge himself went up and suitably thanked everybody for the great honor. Let's bring in Charles Krauthammer, who is in Washington watching the proceedings. So let's talk politics here. It's probably true that the stalwart Democrats like Senator Schumer and Congresswoman Pelosi won't directly smear Judge Gorsuch because that would be political suicide. Instead, they'll farm it out to their vicious hit groups. George Soros funded many of them to really try to damage the man in the eyes of the public. And that would give the Democratic Party then cover for not voting for him. However, if they do that, I think that it's going to go back on the Democrats big time and hurt that party immeasurably. What say you?
I don't think so, because unless you can find personal peccadillos in this man's life that you would exploit in your smear campaign, and as you said, that doesn't look very likely given his history. The way that you smear a candidate for the Supreme Court is not by saying that he's a secret wife abuser, but you do it by taking the outcome of his rulings and pretending that that was willed by the judge. For example, you take Hobby Lobby, you take the case of the Little Sisters of the Poor, where these are people who on religious grounds do not want to subsidize or even to give contraceptives as part of their health care plans. So what you do is you pretend in your 30-second ads, you say this is a man who's a theocrat. This is a man who wants to see people denied contraception. This is a man who wants to see religious extremists be able to impose their views on their employees who are in no position to resist because they need a job. So what you do is you take the outcome and then you impute the outcome to what the judge wants to do. The amazing thing is that in his own statement, Judge Gorsuch said a really wise and interesting thing. He said any judge who likes the outcome of all of his cases is a bad judge. In other words, you are taken to your outcome sometimes where you don't particularly want to go, where if you were a legislator, you would go the other way. But you're not a legislator. You're a judge. You're an interpreter of the law, and you say principle compels me to have this outcome. So if you ask
because
how
the
you're
Constitution says this, and this falls under protection of the Constitution.
And
however,
you could be a believer of the opposite policy.
Yeah, you can say politically I think, but my job is to uphold the Constitution. Okay, but here's it. In order for that strategy to prevail, there would have to be restraint, which we don't see in America anymore in politics. There is no restraint. So I expect right away for the bomb throwers to come out with he's a misogynist, he doesn't like gay people, he doesn't do this, real personal stuff. And they'll comb and try to find any kind of... So in order for this campaign to besmirch him, to work, they got to get through to the folks. They can't do theoretical. They got to go, he's bad, he's evil. And I expect that to happen to some extent.
It always happens, and it began with Bork. Within 1 hour of the Bork nomination, Ted Kennedy is on the floor of the Senate, and he says that Robert Bork's America is an America where women have to have a backroom abortion, where blacks aren't allowed at the lunch counter, etc. In other words, interpreting some of the decisions he made by the outcome and totally distorting what his views really are. But that began with Kennedy. It created a tradition that goes until today. And today, very clever groups on the left will use either words from his decisions, even if it's in a footnote, or outcomes to say, as you say, he's a misogynist, he's insensitive to civil rights, he's not up with the times, and he will relegate women to backroom abortions.
Okay, but if the Democratic Party does that in their hearings, or it's gonna fly back at them like crazy, because that party's already really in trouble they're really in trouble, the Democrats. That's my talking points tomorrow night.
I don't think it
All right?
flies back
And
on them at all.
you don't.
That's what
you think
they've
they
done.
get away clean with it?
Well, they've done this since Bork. It didn't hurt them after Bork. The
It
fact
didn't hurt
is
him. Donald Trump's president. It didn't hurt him. Donald Trump's president.
Yeah, but
Donald Trump's president.
Republicans lost the presidency for 8 years twice. It isn't as if it's a slam dunk. The country is divided on social issues. They are going to put their finger on the hot button, social issues, and try to show how this judge and this kind of reasoning leads you to a place that will offend half the country.
Right.
That's how it works.
Make a prediction. Is he on the Supreme Court in 3 months?
Absolutely. Slam dunk.
I agree. Good. Charles Krauthammer, everybody.